My editor asked that I read a couple of pages from the new novel Ribbon of Dreams, so here we go. Chapter 1, January 2nd, 1975. You ain't worth killing. Clarence wondered if saying something like this in front of the school guidance counselor would get him in trouble. But it slipped out before he had a chance to edit himself, and it was, after all, a direct quote from Rod. I'm not sure what you mean, Miss Black said. She wore a thin, braided leather headband around her hair. It could have been seen as a statement, or maybe she just wanted to look like a hippie. Clarence didn't know which and didn't feel comfortable asking her. He looked up from staring at a smudge on the toe of his tennis shoes. His right knee bounced as he said, My stepfather says that sometimes when something happens, her training kicked in. Does your stepfather hit you? Have you ever felt threatened? Clarence shook his head. While her words were soft and imploring, Rod's voice was more forceful. Besides, he'd heard his stepfather's words for much longer. Have you ever had thoughts of hurting yourself? She asked. Of course he had, but he knew that saying so would start some serious shit that he didn't want to fool with. No, of course not, he lied. And then the framed diplomas caught his eye. He read the names Belmont College, Vanderbilt University, a certificate of membership in Phi Beta Kappa, and something that wasn't a diploma, licensed clinical social worker. Her name was printed somewhere on all the pieces of paper, Roberta Black. And as you would expect from a therapist who also doubled as the health teacher, the school counselor dressed conservatively, except for the headband. Her black knit dress had a high collar, and her mascara and lipstick were understated. The health classes included personal hygiene and sex education, but nothing too specific. The principal wanted to keep those classes under the radar as much as possible. The counselor played her part well, believing teenagers needed information about their bodies to make decisions that could impact the rest of their lives. She didn't use film strips, language, or pictures that would draw an uptight parent's attention. Clarence, she continued, Skid, please. Everybody calls me Skid. All right, Skid. It's a nickname my friends gave me, he said with a smile. Maybe I'll tell you the story someday. Oh, okay, she said, the counselor said. It has nothing to do with gym class or underwear, does it? Surprisingly, Skid said no. She nodded and looked up from a form she'd filled out that as they talked. I'm new here, but I want you to know that I've met all of your teachers and most of the students who need my help. She stopped and then added, My help with college appla. I haven't made up my mind about college, he interrupted. She tried again. It's just that since you're graduating soon, right, Miss Black, I said I'm thinking about it. Skid interrupted again, changing his tone so the words sounded more like he was flirting. He couldn't help himself. She looked like a young Ingrid Bergman from his favorite film, Casablanca. Of course, she was too old for him. Now, she looked 25, maybe even 26. Ancient in his mind. Good, she said. Thinking is good. One thing's for sure, I'm getting the hell out of here. Bookcases lined the north wall of her office, but the shelves were mostly empty. Several framed pictures, of whom Skid could only guess might be family members, sat at eye level. She didn't wear a wedding ring, so he assumed that she wasn't married. I just need a hall pat. She had already removed a small pad and pulled a pen from behind her ear. She wrote with an exaggerated flourish at the end of the sentence, as if she were conducting a symphony that signaled the musicians the last note. Here, just give this to your homeroom teach, Mr. Solomon, Skid interrupted. Yes, Mr. Solomon, she said, as she tore off the slip of paper and slid it across her desk. Skid stood and picked up the note. My grandmother was Japanese, and when something bad happened, she always said, Nana Karabi Yaoki. And what does that mean? Literally, 7 falls, 8 getting up, she said, smiling. Skid thought, so I am worth killing. But he knew that was the one thing he shouldn't tell her. The bell signaling it was time to change classrooms rang. Skid glanced up at the clock and nodded in agreement. In life, he'd found timing was everything. Stepped through the open door. He glanced at the piece of plastic from the former counselor's name, still embossed in white on black. I hope you get a new nameplate here, he said, pointing at the door. She nodded and pulled a notebook from under a pile of papers. I'm working on it.